Hello, I'm John Grom, and welcome to our 199th Right and Left Discussion Forum. We hold our televised discussions twice monthly to demonstrate the value of civil, productive, open-minded political dialogue. Today, our panel will discuss the Florida Parental Rights in Education Bill and the broad opposition to it from many on the political left. Today's panel begins with Patty Haskins, former member of the Wadsworth City Council and the faculty at Wadsworth High School. Bryan Laubaugh, president of R&B Financial Services, and Dr. Ronald Chamberlin, retired senior research chemist, and Joe Gaines, former faculty member at the University of Akron and Wadsworth High School. Patty, recently, Florida State Legislature passed a bill that prohibits classroom discussion about sexual orientation or gender identity at grade levels K through 3. The bill is being referred to by the left as an attack on LGBTQ community. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think that everyone would agree that there shouldn't be discussions of sexuality in grades K to 3. As a matter of fact, it wasn't being done in Florida or here in Ohio or anywhere that anyone can actually state. If the bill had just been about that, I think many people might have said, oh, okay, it's not being done, but we don't agree with it. You know, the problem is that is not all that the bill states. It does say that there could be no discussions teacher-led of gender identity or sexual orientation in grades 1 to 3. The concerning part is when it also bans any discussion with older students that a parent would deem not age appropriate or developmentally appropriate. So if you as a parent decide that in 7th grade or 8th grade, your student is not to learn what they would normally learn presently in health class, you could not only demand that that not be taught to your child, but you can also sue the school district and sue the parent, which is going to be extremely expensive for parents and for school districts. That's one of their major concerns. I mean, my big question is why the big push for this bill. I read recently an opinion editorial in the Medina Gazette, which is not a bastion of liberalism by any stretch of the imagination, but their basic comment was, why are they doing this? And they're looking at a number of different things. The one point on this editorial was that it was probably being done as a political ploy by Ron DeSantis, who very honestly wants to run for president. I think that he does. He wants to make news, national news, and he does so by hitting one of the hot topics, #1 priorities in the Republican Party now, and that is a discussion of gender and LBG. I always say it wrong. LGBTQ issues. I don't know. I guess the other thing is that when they set this bill up, there's a lot of confusion about it. #1, they didn't talk to students who might be impacted by this. They didn't talk to health care professionals in setting up what would be good policy for dealing with these situations. Their chief spokeswoman, whose name I can't remember right now, actually connects non-hetero orientation with pedophilia, which very honestly has been one of the claims that anybody that is opposed to this bill must believe in pedophilia, which is certainly far, far from the case. I think what might have prompted it is all of the issues concerning Leah Thomas and transgenders being able to compete in female sports. I think that is an issue that needs to be addressed. We've discussed that on this panel, but I'm not sure that an entire bill on this would be a reason for it. Another concern that I've heard is that, or an explanation for this bill, is that it is being placed into effect so as to drive people away from public schools and into private schools, and to change our educational system. And this has been voiced by people like Laura Ingraham on Fox News, who has stated that, don't go to public schools, see what they're doing to your children. You need to go to private schools. Ergo, the money that goes into public schools should go to private schools. And I'm not particularly in favor of that. I have concerns because it does prevent discussion of issues that should be discussed in schools. If a child is bullied because they do not seem to fit this typical stereotype of a male or of a female, and are called names for that, is the teacher allowed to then say you cannot bully a child for that reason? You can't bully a child for any reason, but you can't do that. And if they do that or reprimand a child, the parent could come in and say, you're not allowed to discuss gender orientation with my child, and then sue the parent, sue the teacher, and sue the school district. I think this is an issue that's been taken too far. We see it now, it's coming to Ohio. Ohio not only wants to ban any type of discussion of sexual orientation, and again, if it was just K-3, and that's all they wanted to discuss, great. The bill would be about one paragraph long, and nobody would have made a stink about it. But Ohio's extending it like Florida did. They're also adding in CRT. The interesting part is, CRT is not being taught in Ohio. What people conceive to be CRT is not, I think, in many people's minds, as soon as you mention slavery or racism of any kind, that you are teaching CRT, and that's not the case. And I have some real concerns about the Ohio bill, which is going through the state legislature right now.
Okay. Well, Brian, I'm sure that you were in total agreement with Patty.
Oh, sure.
Well, they say the hit bird flutters. And I think that this legislation in Florida is sort of preemptive. We've seen a White House and a administration that has sort of sidled up to the LGBTQ, whatever the plus and exclamation point on it is. And states are beginning to say, you know what, we're not going to have the Justice Department sending letters like they did to different colleges not that long ago. If you remember, under Mr. Obama, they sent letters that basically said, hey, you know what, this is coming down the pike. We would hope that you would have genderless bathrooms. We would hope that you would be inclusive. And we see the result of that in the swimmer from, what is it, Penn State or Pitt? We see the result of that with women's sports basically being gutted. So I look at this law as, one of those preemptive strikes for keeping the federal government out of mandating what a local school system teaches. And that's, I think that's a concern. I believe that common sense would say that any kindergartner or up to third grade, and I'll be honest with you, I raised 4 kids, and every week what they wanted to be changed. One week they wanted to be a fireman, the next week they wanted to be a dolphin trainer, the next week they wanted to be master of the universe. And it's not hard to convince little kids that they have issues. And I would much rather have parents notified like they did in the Wadsworth City schools. We got plenty of letters that said, hey, here in 6th grade, we're going to be watching a film. And that film might be, somewhat, against or different than what you would approve of. Here's the film. Here's what it's rated. Would you please sign off on that? When you look at the outrage of the folks on the other side, the LGBTQ people, I mean, I just see some of this stuff on TikTok, and you would think that we've just taken the legs out from under them as far as them being able to discuss their sexual preferences, and I mean, they're coming out of the walls, and they're finding out that, you know, they're teaching kindergarten, first grade, second grade, and they're strident that they need to have this right, because heaven forbid if Jimmy comes in and a kindergartner and says that he wants to be a ballerina, well, that must mean he is, you know, he wants to be a little girl, so he needs to have this protection. I don't believe that. I don't believe that a parent gives up their right to their child at all until that child becomes the age of majority, you know, 18 in most states, sometimes 20, 21. The notion that somehow schools, and we haven't had it happen in our school district, but there are schools out there that kids can actually get abortions without their parents being notified. There are schools out there, I mean, you can't even give a kid an aspirin anymore. But now they're saying that, well, if your son or daughter comes in and expresses an interest in the other sex, I mean, 5, 6, 7-year-old, 8-year-old, I really have a problem with that. Maybe I'm not that big of a fan of the way Florida went about it, but I really believe it was a preemptive strike from a Justice Department that's bending over backwards to accommodate and be tolerant of people. And you know, with that, I'm compassionate. You know, the people that have these particular issues, I get it. They need protections. I'm all for that, but I don't see this as being that big of a deal. But they seem to be making it that big of a deal because they put a, you know, don't say gay. There was this, I mean, they flooded social media with their opinions and everything. And I just think it's common sense. I don't want my grandkids that are going into kindergarten and first grade and second grade being exposed to that. And I think if the kindergarten teacher wants to have that conversation, notification needs to go out. And I haven't read the Ohio bill, but I just think that we need to step back from this and say, you know what, maybe we've taken it a little too far. Do we really need to, basically accommodate little kids? I will tell you an aside. I have a daughter. She's a guidance counselor in a school in North Carolina. And their school has a policy. And that policy is if that student wants to change their name to whatever, they can. They don't need the parents' approval. So the 9th grader comes in and she's a cat. Now, she's in North Carolina. I don't know the girl, but hopefully this doesn't get down there to them. But she's got a cat. She wants to be, and her name is, you know, Fur Baby something. And she changed her name on the school records. It's going to be on her diploma if she continues with that. And she wants to know, you know, what accommodations the school is going to make because she's a cat. Now, you think that's funny, but my daughter has to deal with this every day. You know, a kid saying that they're a cat and they want to be accommodated because there's a cat. They're a cat. I just don't think that belongs in the school. So that's where I'm coming from. I'm not sure we have to legislate it, put bills in place, but I look at it as a preemptive strike to basically fortify and keep some of this stuff at bay.
Ron, do you like cats?
Not particularly. Maybe they should put a litter box in the for, you know, I don't know.
Maybe that's next.
Well, I got a couple of thoughts here. I have a number of close gay friends. I've had a lot of acquaintances and a lot of acquaintances who turned out to be gay before I knew it, that I didn't know about until someone else told me. And the only one that I've had any in-depth conversation with about childhood experiences, a woman, she told me that she just never felt very comfortable as a girl when she was a very young child. She's in those days, of course, she's now in her 60s. So she suppressed those feelings, got married, had a child, the marriage ended, and she finally realized that she wasn't really suited for this, and so she now has a partner, and so on, and she's very happy. But I've got a couple of things. First of all, nobody's planning to give sex education classes in pre-K through third grade. That's not the issue here. But where if a kid comes in and has a problem and needs a supportive background, a supportive atmosphere to express their diversity or questions about it. If you say, well, look, Jenny has two mommies, what's that about? I think there needs to be an opportunity for a helpful, age-appropriate, gender-appropriate discussion for that in elementary school. And the only real testimony I have for this is the testimony of some people from the LGBTQ plus community who are writing about this. And I don't mean in a inflammatory way or a knee-jerk reaction kind of way, but really thoughtful things that I've read in recent things. And what better place for a safe environment, a safe discussion is with a caring teacher who is trained to think about these situations. And the second thing is that there's a diversity issue here. And we do have a diverse population. We are gender diverse. We are sexuality diverse. And that's true in the broader community. That's true for children, I think. Now, in the case of all of us who have small children and the age in which our children were small, it's not really, it didn't come up. Everything was really pretty much under sub rosa, no one really talked about it. It's not true now. I don't know. I just visited my 8-year-old grandson, and situation didn't come up. We weren't talking about that. But I don't know what happens in his school. He goes to a charter school. His teachers tell his parents that he is a very supportive, loving kid who is always there to help comfort and talk to other children who are having problems. He's always first there to try to help them out. I think that's a good sign. But I don't know about the sexuality issue in his particular school. But it seems to me that it's a diversity issue. Bryan, you make an interesting point about a preemptive strike in state legislatures. It isn't state legislators, it's Republican state legislators. It's you guys. So I'm looking over there because you're over there on my screen. So that's an interesting point and probably a valid one. I'm not arguing with that, but I think that it's a misguided thing, and it's potentially a harmful thing to little kids. And I haven't seen any information or any weigh-in from child psychologists or from people who understand children, who work with children. So I can't come from that point of view, but I think in the summary, these bills are wrong.
And the wrong, summarize the wrongness, Ron.
Summarize the wrongness is what I've just been saying: the lack of diversity, the lack of accommodation for children's feelings, and where they're a tender age and need sympathetic background and sympathetic.
Is there something about the Florida bill that prohibits a troubled child from talking to a counselor one-on-one?
It could be, and I read what I've read so far about the Ohio bill that would be true, and pretty much. And I think every parent has the right, if they dislike something that the school is doing, to go talk to their teacher. I've had experience of that. Didn't get very far. The teacher in question was Art Baldwin. Some of you may remember Art. He wasn't easily swayed. So I had an issue with one of my kids in band, and so I felt free. I go call him up and talk. We talked for half an hour and so forth, and neither of us convinced the other, but it was what I needed to do. And I think every parent still has the right to do that. To the fact that the parent can go sue the teacher, that seems a little extreme.
Yeah. Patty, I'd like to circle back. You gave me a piece of information that I didn't have, that the Florida bill goes beyond prohibiting a teacher from conducting a conversation with kindergarten through third grade. What, would you tell us again what the rest of that bill includes?
What it says, it bans any discussion with older students not age appropriate or developmentally appropriate.
Yeah.
Now, who would decide what is age appropriate or developmentally appropriate is the parent. So when you talk about, for example, a student going to a counselor and talking to them, that's great. And the counselor talks to them. The kid goes home, tells mom and dad, they decide, I didn't want my kid to talk about this. I'm going to sue that counselor.
Mm.
So what this means is that no one will be able, no, they'll be afraid to actually discuss any type of concerns or options or counseling to that child for fear that the parent is going to come back and sue them for doing something that the parent deems
Yeah,
inappropriate. You know,
Yeah.
if the child, for example, feels as an older child, feels that they are trans or gay, and I actually have a very good friend whose grandchild has transitioned from female to male. And this was actually done at the middle school level. That child is now in their 20s and is very happy with that transition. This is happening, and that child, you know, the parents may not be in favor of it. Certainly they would be concerned. And the child is just simply looking for someone to discuss this issue with. I mean, there have been big issues about the amount of depression and suicide cases for those in these different communities. And I think a lot of it's because they're not being able to talk to people or to work through the issues with someone that is willing to listen. And I don't know, that's just where I am on this issue.
okay, Joe, what are your thoughts on this topic as a former teacher?
Well, even as a teacher, I still think that the parents should have the say. Can you hear me okay?
Yes,
Mhm.
fine.
Yeah.
I still think the parents have the final say. But you gotta have discussion. These kids have to know where other people stand, why they stand there, their purpose. So I think discussion is important. I kind of agree more with what Patty was saying.
You're at 11, right? Okay.
Okay, I agree with what Patty was basically saying. Well, that's about it. I don't have a whole lot to say on this topic.
Well, you mentioned that you agreed parents should have an input. Excuse
Yeah.
me. But I'm thinking about the difference between talking to a parent talking to a counselor, a kid talking to a counselor. The difference between that and the full classroom discussion, with this being the topic of the day in kindergarten.
It should be in kindergarten, no.
How about first grade?
I think starting at third, fourth grade would be the best.
Is that right?
Yeah.
For
know,
a
But
kid to
that's
walk
not
into a
being
class,
done.
You know,
Well,
one of the,
walk into
What-
a classroom one day and the teacher said, well, class, today, we're going to talk about homosexuality. How many of you think you're homos? I mean,
No one's talking about doing that, though.
No,
That's,
What are we
that's
talking
that's
about?
sex education, and then we're not talking about that.
no.
No one's interested in doing that. We're interested with an individual child who comes in with a problem and wants to know about it. Can the
Mhm.
teacher discuss that with him or her? Yes, I think the teacher should be able to do that.
I
Yeah, there's
really,
no
I really think that we can't disregard the parent's rights. The parent has a right to know what these situations are. And what I fear is a student goes in and the school then acts as some sort of mediator between the parents and saying, well, we know what's best for your son or daughter. And they've expressed today that they want to be a boy or a girl, and we have to support that. And the parent's like, well, wait a second, where's my right at? Where's my right as the parent to say, hey, you know what? Maybe my
Mhm.
son or daughter needs some professional counseling. You know, my granddaughter just went through the 5th grade maturation talk, and her school sent out a letter. All the parents were invited. You know, they showed a film, they talked about, they did boys and the girls in separate rooms and all that kind of stuff, and they covered some of these things. What's wrong with that? Why I don't see it hobbling a teacher. If the teacher wants to have a conversation on homosexuality or any sort of issue, send home a letter and say, you know, part of our curriculum, we're talking about this today. What do you think? Would you like your son or daughter to participate in that? I just think, you know, this could be averted if we just keep the parents in the loop instead of saying, well, wait a second, the school is some sacrosanct, you know, neutral party that, you know, whatever that student says, that 5th grader says, we have to abide by it. You know, I'm really troubled by the fact that there are school systems out there that kids can actually go in and, you know, the school is under no obligation to inform the parent that they're getting birth control. They're under no obligation that they're getting counseling from different groups about abortions and stuff like that. I think that usurps a parent's responsibility. I would want to know that. I'd want to have that ball in my court to say, hey, you know what? Let's talk about this. You know, if my daughter was pregnant, I'd want to know about that. Not at the last minute. I do
Yeah, but
know
she's
that
not
my
gonna be
daughter is
pregnant
under
in third
very
grade.
strict.
She's
What's
not going to
that?
be pregnant in 3rd grade, Brian. You're talking about sex education in upper grades. And,
Yeah.
and again, you're talking about a communication problem here. I think I agree with you. There has to be a two-way communication in situations. What you're describing as being against is the old in loco parentis, you know, in a parent's place attitude that the school system have had for many years.
But,
Well,
but there's
about
always creep.
We're about out
There
of time on
There's
this.
always legislative creep. And it always creeps to the side that, you know, basically, you know, all hold, you know, there's no holds barred. I mean,
Okay, well, I'm going to end this conversation right now by saying that I
Okay.
think it's all an attack on wokeism. And I think that we ought to discuss that as our next topic. And thank you very much, folks, for a wonderful program.
Thanks.
I,
You are watching WCTV, Wadsworth Community Television.